For more than 80 years, the US dollar has reigned supreme. Ever since the Bretton Woods Conference in 1944, the dollar became the backbone of global economy. Countries trusted it, trade was priced in it, and central banks held it as the main reserve currency. The dollar's dominance was backed not only by America's huge industrial power after World War II, but also by its military reach and political influence. But here, in 2025, that dominance is being tested like never before. In fact, many analysts believe that we are now living through the beginning of the end of the dollar's absolute supremacy. And one symbol of this shift is the rise of gold, which has just smashed through $3,500 per ounce, an all-time record. So the big question is, why are people turning away from the dollar, and why are they running towards the gold? Let's start with the most immediate trigger. Investors believe the Federal Reserve will cut interest rates in September. Lower interest rates make US bonds and savings accounts less attractive. If holding the dollar earns you less than gold, which is an asset that doesn't pay interest but holds its value, then suddenly this becomes much more appealing. At the same time, the US dollar itself is weakening. Political uncertainty in Washington, constant battles over government spending, and concerns about whether the Fed is truly independent. Because if the dollar is seen as unstable, people naturally will look for alternatives. And the number one alternative for centuries has been gold. But what's happening goes far beyond short-term market moves. We are seeing a much bigger story, the steady march of de-dollarization. This is the process where countries, companies, and investors reduce their reliance on the dollar. So what exactly is de-dollarization? Well, for decades, almost all global trade from oil to electronics was priced in dollars. Central banks around the world held piles of US dollars in their reserves. The system worked because everyone trusted the US to keep its financial system stable. But that trust is eroding. One turning point came back in 2022 when the US and its allies froze hundreds of billions of Russian dollar reserves after the invasion of Ukraine. To many countries, this sent a clear message. If you hold your savings in dollars, Washington can use them as a political weapon. Since then, governments have been working harder to settle trade in their own currencies. Take India and Russia. They now trade oil in rupees and rubles. China and Brazil are settling deals in yuan and reals. Across Southeast Asia, the ASEAN bloc has a new plan from 2026 to 2030 to prioritize local currency trade. Even Africa is joining this shift, with leaders in the Sahel region pushing to abandon colonial-era currencies like the CFA franc and replace them with independent or regional alternatives. This isn't just about money, it's about dignity, independence, and control. As African Voices put it, you cannot be politically free if you are not economically free. At the heart of this push is BRICS: Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and now joined by Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Argentina, Ethiopia, Iran, and the UAE. Together, they represent a massive share of global trade and have already surpassed the G7 in terms of purchasing power. BRICS is openly challenging the dollar system by trading more in national currencies and even discussing the possibility of a shared financial framework. All of this weakens the dollar's global network effect, the idea that people used it simply because everyone else did. Once that trust is broken and alternatives become available, diversification away from the dollar can accelerate rapidly. Meanwhile, central banks are quietly reshaping their reserves. In the first quarter of 2025 alone, they bought 244 metric tons of gold, well above the normal 5-year average. That's the strongest buying since the late 1960s. Private investors are doing the same. Gold-backed ETFs attracted $30 billion in the first half of 2025 after seeing outflows the year before. Households, especially in countries like India and China, are buying more physical gold for savings. For many families, it feels safer to store wealth in gold than in a foreign currency that might lose value overnight. This rush of demand is one of the reasons gold has skyrocketed to record highs. But why gold specifically? Gold is a unique place in the global economy. It's not just a commodity, it's a kind of quasi-currency. It has no central issuer, no default risk, and no government that can print more of it. For thousands of years across empires and continents, gold has been the ultimate store of value. And right now, gold's appeal is boosted by the perception that the US dollar is no longer as trustworthy as it once was. The US national debt has climbed past $36 trillion. Annual interest payments are over $1 trillion, more than America spends on its military. Unlike most countries, the US can finance this simply by creating more dollars, thanks to its reserve status. But, as Nobel Prize-winning economist Joseph has warned, this exorbitant privilege cannot last forever. Eventually, the rest of the world grows tired for funding US deficits for free. And it's not just about economics. Trust in the US is being eroded on moral and political grounds as well. Washington continues to spend billions on wars and military aid in places like Ukraine and Israel, financed by printing more money. To many in the global south, this looks like a double standard. America funds its conflicts while the ripple effects like inflation and higher interest rates hurt poorer countries that had no say in the matter. Recent events have deepened this distrust even further. In Europe, countries like Germany and Italy have been talking about bringing back their gold reserve, bringing it back from New York vaults. They don't want to risk leaving their wealth in American custody. Meanwhile, leaders in Africa and Asia openly question whether the US can still claim moral authority in global affairs, especially given ongoing crises like the suffering in Gaza. All of this chips away at the foundation of the dollar, trust. And when trust fades, people look for stability, and that's where gold comes in. So where does this all lead? The dollar isn't going to vanish overnight. It still makes up about 58% of global reserves, and nearly 90% of global trade transactions still touch the dollar. Its network, depth of markets, and role in finance remain massive, but the direction is clear. The world is moving toward a more multipolar currency system. That could mean regional currencies gaining more power, like the yuan in Asia, or even future African currencies. And at the center of it all is gold, steadily regaining its role as a trusted reserve asset. Some analysts believe gold could climb even higher. Goldman Sachs predicts $4,000 an ounce by mid-2026. And if large investors shift even a small fraction of their holdings out of US treasuries into gold, prices could even approach $5,000. So what does this mean for ordinary people? Well, first of all, this isn't financial advice, but understanding these shifts help us see where the world is heading. When you hear that countries are settling trade in local currencies or that central banks are buying record amounts of gold, it tells us that confidence in the dollar isn't what it used to be. For everyday folks, gold has always been seen as a kind of insurance, something you can count on when paper currencies lose value. But beyond investment, this story shows us something bigger. The world is changing. The financial order that defined the last 80 years is being rewritten right now. One trade deal, one central bank purchase, and one political crisis at a time. So to sum it all up, gold surge past $3,500 per ounce is more than just a market story. It's a signal of fading trust in the US dollar, the rise of de-dollarization, and the world moving towards new centers of financial power. We're not seeing a collapse, we're seeing a transition. And that transition could shape the way money works for decades to come. So, what do you think? Is the dollar's time as the world's king currency coming to an end? And could gold really reclaim its old crown as the ultimate global reserve? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. And if you found this breakdown useful, I mean, I'm no financial advisor, I just make about life in China. But if this video was interesting to you, news about China like this, about the US dollar, please let me know down in the comments below and subscribe for more videos. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.